Welcome to this North Carolina Community College System Success NC Update. I'm Sharon Morrissey, Senior Vice President and Chief Academic Officer for the North Carolina Community College System. Joining me today are Dr. Scott Ralls, President of the North Carolina Community College System, and Dr. Mark Milliron, Deputy Director of Post-Secondary Improvement with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Thank you for joining me here this morning. Dr. Milliron, North Carolina is one of 4 states recently selected by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation for resource support to develop initiatives and activities to promote and support college completion in North Carolina. Why has the foundation made college completion a priority?
It speaks to the core of what the foundation cares about. The foundation's core mission is about helping people have the chance to live healthy and productive lives. And of course that plays out in different ways in the different programs that the foundation sponsors. So, 27 different strategies in the foundation, lots of work in global health, global development. Internationally, that healthy and productive life work is focused on things like curing AIDS, curing malaria, really fighting rotavirus, global development, anti-poverty programs, and the like. But in the United States, what we really see is that in many ways the pathway to possibility increasingly runs through education. If you want people to have the chance to live healthy and productive lives, they have to get some kind of education. And increasingly it's not just a K-12 education. We've invested a lot in K-12 education. We call it our college ready strategy, getting 80% of the students who graduate from high schools college ready. What we see now though is that for folks to be able to actually have a living wage and move themselves out of poverty, they actually have to get some kind of education and training beyond high school and move into some kind of post-secondary credentials. And so we've gotten very serious about this idea of how we can help more low-income folks access and succeed in higher education. The challenge is we've been very, very good on the access side. We have done a lot of work. We have more work to do, of course, but a lot of our work on access has been radically successful. What we haven't been as successful in is the completion of those folks through their programs. So if you're in the upper income brackets in this country, like the upper 2 income brackets, you're between 60 and 75% likely to complete a credential. If you're in the lower income brackets, you're about 12% likely to complete a credential. And that's where you just kind of take a deep breath and say, boy, we've got to figure out what we can do better, and especially if we want this to be the movement of people up the social ladder. And for us, this really is a social justice strategy. We are about trying to give people the chance to live those healthy and productive lives, leveraging education to lift themselves out of poverty.
So how does this Completion by Design initiative support the post-secondary completion work that the Gates Foundation is so eager to see develop?
Yeah, it's pretty clear. Melinda is fond of saying that the line between the have and the have-nots runs right through community colleges. Community colleges are, in many ways, the dominant provider of education for low-income young adults. So if you want to take the mission that we're taking on seriously, you really have to focus on community colleges. And what's pretty clear is community colleges have been radically committed to access, giving more and more people access to the open door into the kinds of programs that they're providing. What we're trying to focus on now is not just getting them in the open door, but actually getting them across the stage. And so Completion by Design is about this idea of working with students from the first contact to the time they complete their credential and doing a tough-minded analysis of that journey, really looking at the students that are coming into those credential pathways and looking at what are the big loss points, where are we really losing those students, and what are the strategies that we're employing that are being radically effective, and how do we put those together in a way where we can make it more likely that a student succeeds when they enter a community college. Again, our big goal with Completion by Design is to work with high capacity community colleges and community college partners, and to work together in kind of a learning community to figure out what works, especially when you really innovate at scale, to help most students who start in a community college finish, in particular low-income students.
And there were 4 states selected for this investment in Completion by Design, North Carolina being one of those. Dr. Ralls, who will lead this initiative in North Carolina, and how were those colleges chosen?
Well, in North Carolina we have 5 colleges, 5 community colleges. Guilford Technical Community College is our lead college, and they really emerged recommended by their colleagues. Guilford Technical Community College is a national leader in student success, has been well recognized, been one of the pioneers in the Achieving the Dream initiative, and a college that's really recognized as having taken that initiative and made some real cultural changes at their institutions. So Guilford Tech was a natural leader for us. We have two other of our largest colleges, Central Piedmont Community College and Wake Tech, who are both doing very interesting things in student success. Central Piedmont in career pathways, Wake Tech in technology. They also are involved in city-wide initiatives that the Gates Foundation is sponsoring around student completion, both in Charlotte and in Raleigh. And then rounding out our 5-college cadre, one of our middle-sized colleges, Davidson County Community College, which has also been a real leader, particularly in the Achieving the Dream initiative, involvement in that, breaking through and other core initiatives around student success. And then a smaller college in Eastern North Carolina, Martin Community College, which has also been one of the pioneers in Achieving the Dream. Achieve some real cultural changes, real paying attention to data. So together those 5 colleges represent the diversity of our state, diversity of the size of North Carolina community colleges, but they each bring unique strengths to the overall initiative.
And Dr. Milliron, you mentioned earlier the framework for looking at student completion. And I believe you, in your role with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, you've actually developed a momentum loss framework, which is the framework that will be supporting all of the work that's going to be done in completion by design. Can you talk to us a little bit about that framework?
We've had a team of folks that have worked with the Community College Research Center, our own folks internally, and also folks like you all in the field to really think about that student journey from first contact to completion. And the best presidents will tell you it's from entry to endowment, actually. You want them coming back and actually contributing in the long run. But what we're really trying to figure out is there a good methodology for us to be able to take a step back and unpack that journey and be thoughtful about what's working and what's not? So what we've done with the loss momentum framework is we've actually taken that journey and broken it into 4 stages. One stage is connection, another stage is entry, then there's progression, then there's completion. In each of those stages, what we've done is we've tried to analyze what are the big loss points. If you look nationally, where are we losing the most students during the connection stage, the entry stage, the progression stage, and completion? And what are the big innovations that are working to drive momentum in each of those phases? So if you look at connection, entry, progression, and completion. So for connection, it's from the first time you connect with a student to the time they actually apply. And there's a lot of ways that people get in, whether they're adult reentry or they're coming right from high school. And we can talk a lot about the connections there. The entry stage is really from the time they apply to the time that they actually get through a gatekeeper course. And so that includes all the work in developmental education, all the work of getting them into the place where they can get ready to join a program. Progression is from the point that they join that program of study till they get about 3/4 of the way through. That's the hard work of them getting through their programs. And completion is getting them across that finish line and getting them into a good job or getting them into a transfer program where they can move into a university and be successful. But by breaking it down that way, we can put all the pieces and parts together and figure out where are we hemorrhaging students? What are the big loss points that if we don't get these right, we're never going to succeed? And what are the big things that we're doing that are working incredibly well? Very much like what you did with the listening tour, where you went around the state and said, what's working well? And then we would take those things and plug them into the framework and say, how can we look at this in a really methodical way to then, our goal is from this to develop a plan that you can then implement at scale that could impact students in a much greater way.
So let's unpack the framework just a little bit more. The first stage is connection. Dr. Ralls, in North Carolina, we're doing a lot of work to create stronger connections with K-12. We're doing a lot of work on K-12 alignment. Can you talk a little bit about some of those initiatives?
Well, I think in North Carolina, that's an area of strength for us, but like most efforts related to student success, that's where we see where we've lost a lot of momentum, if you will, because we've been misaligned. A good example is the testing that takes place in high school now. Students are tested all the way through. They're tested end of grade. They come to us. We test those students and put 2/3 back in high school classes. And it's not because we're not working together or not working diligently, but because we use different definitions of college readiness. And so a lot of work has gone in the last year or two around our success efforts jointly with public schools to have common alignment in terms of definitions of college readiness, what we mean by that, moving the testing we use into the public schools. And also what I think will be very significant for us is a realignment of dual enrollment based on more pathway models, not just individual course models, which we think will help prevent some of the losses that are coming. So that bookends very well, we think, on the starting point of connection in terms of the momentum loss framework.
And there's something about that connection with K-12 that really matters. The longer a person delays after leaving K-12 before they go back into the post-secondary world, the less likely they are to ever achieve some kind of a credential. And so connecting with them early and painting a vision of what it could be, but not breaking their hearts when they get to the front door and they take that placement test and find out they're not ready. And so part of this is we have a really interesting moment because 44 states have adopted the Common Core, which is this kind of redesign of the K-12 curriculum, in particular the high school curriculum for college readiness. We have a chance now to reach back and really start the conversations about what is college readiness, and are the students who are graduating from high schools ready when they hit the front door, and how can we make sure we do it in a way where it doesn't overburden them with lots of testing, but where we align our curriculum so when those students graduate, they can walk right in the front door ready to hit the ground. It really is about acceleration, and acceleration isn't necessarily putting the foot on the pedal to make a student go faster. It's about clearing bureaucracy brush, right? And then also doing the work of aligning curriculum so a student doesn't have to do rework when they come in the door. So dual enrollment's wonderful because they get an early experience of what the expectations are and it raises the bar. And so for high ability students, you can accelerate them with dual enrollment. For lower ability students, it's about intervening early and helping them understand where they might be behind and where they can really dive in to start doing some work there in high school so that when they get done, they are ready to hit the ground running in post-secondary. And in that connection stage, it really is the probably highest, best value you can do is to build those connections between K-12 and the community college sector.
We've had a lot of momentum in North Carolina through the success of the early college high schools with the support of the Gates Foundation. That's created a lot of momentum, and what I'm excited about is you see that now spreading beyond that early college high school focus, dual enrollment taking on that same notion of pathway models, and as we start to talk too about our Basic Skills Plus, Accelerating Opportunity Initiatives, those combine together. So I think the connection piece is a real opportunity of strength for us in this movement.
And of course, we will always have a need for developmental education in our community colleges because we bring so many adults, displaced workers, or adults who desire to change careers or learn a new job skill come to community colleges. So we'll always be in the dev ed business. But the next component of the framework is entry, and it seems to me that developmental education plays a big role there. I know, of course, in North Carolina, we're doing a lot of work in developmental education reform, redesign. Would you speak a little about that, Dr.
Well, the
Ralls?
developmental ed work in the last year has been, to me, some of the most exciting work taking place in our system. It's been catalyzed, you helped be a real catalyst for this, but it's been driven by our faculty, our lead faculty in terms of math, who really just went in and broke it all down and said, based on some principles, let's make developmental ed just no more than 1 year, make it principle driven as opposed to process driven in terms of the learning methods, and let's figure out what are the key competencies and break it down into modules and just rethink everything we're doing with developmental math. And to me, it's been amazing to watch how that has just taken off with that faculty-driven initiative, and we see the next place turning to the English side of that next year. But to me, this is the most exciting work taking place in the last year in our system. Yeah.
I mean, if the biggest loss point in connection is that delaying entry, you know, the biggest loss point in the entry phase is clearly developmental education. I mean, Hillary Pennington, the director of the post-secondary larger strategy, is fond of saying that that developmental education is the Bermuda Triangle of higher education, right? If you look at the data nationally, most students who go in never get out. And so it's that place where we can really lean into that and figure out what can we do to make it more effective. And the faculty, like the ones you have in North Carolina that are really driving this work, are figuring out what are the strategies that work and at what scale, and how do we do it in a way where we can help those students actually see a vision of themselves finishing and moving on into that program of study. And I think it's tough work because part of it is being willing to challenge long-held conceptions that the best way to fix a learning challenge is a course. Because sometimes it's not a course. Sometimes it's about a really good diagnostic that says, here are the 7 learning outcomes you don't know right now, and here are the 35 that are necessary for this course. Let's really focus on those 7. Let's not make you sit through 16 weeks. Let's just really now get into a modular accelerated format. And then when you've done that, let's do a capstone experience to make sure you have the integrated knowledge and it all comes together, and then move you on. And so we have students now who can get through what used to take a year and a half, a year and a summer. And that is just, I mean, it literally is, if you look at the data, like when a student is assessed into developmental education, it's like a kidnap clock goes up. The longer they are in that sequence, the less likely they are ever to get a credential. It is definitely in their best interest for us to be as aggressive as possible to get them into a program of study. And it's not just about acceleration, it's also about integration. Some of the really powerful programs are things like iBest, where they're integrating vocational technical education and basic skills together in a learning community kind of format. Costs a little more, but you get about 9 times the graduation rate. So it's one of those things where sometimes it's not doing more with less, it's doing a whole lot more with a little bit more, right? But all that means, that's one of the powers of the loss momentum framework, is you can now look at things and figure out what are the biggest losses and what are the big momentum strategies that can help put these pieces together. But DevEd is one of those key strategy areas where if you don't get that right, it almost doesn't matter what else you do. Because if you don't get DevEd right, you are going to wipe out the hopes and dreams of millions of low-income students.
You know, a lot of what Mark speaks to were some of the lessons we learned from the listening tour, because we watched, as we went to colleges, we watched a lot of the educational leaders and faculty who were figuring out ways to be innovative, to supplement developmental education, or to work around sort of the systems that we had out there that were very 3-hour course blocks that weren't sufficient for what was needed. So focus areas on ways of using supplemental instruction or coming up with different types of course groupings and having to essentially work around the systems that we had to make the system work for students in progressing through developmental education.
And that's what you want to, that's one of the things we love about working with North Carolina, is that your policy partners want to work with the practitioners, and instead of making them innovate against the policy, right? That's kind of what they're doing. They shouldn't be focusing their innovative energy to innovate against the policy.
It's kind of a waste of
innovation. It's a waste of innovation. That effort should be on how can they really drive the instruction to the highest level possible, and that's where the power of this coming together, having the policy folks working with the practice folks, analyzing the same data, and then saying, what can you all do, what can they do, and then together really kind of make a difference.
So we've talked about connection, we've talked about entry. We now have the next component of the framework, which is progress, which I assume deals with programs, program structure, and perhaps how we use technology to deliver programs. Would you speak a little bit about that section?
Yeah, it's a powerful stage. Because what we know, if you look at the most recent studies coming out of Community College Research Center, is that if a student is on purpose, if we can get them to a place where they really know why they're there, they can almost overcome anyhow. And that purpose very often is about getting them to declare a program of study that makes sense for them. It's not about getting everybody on a transfer path. Some people want to be electricians, some people want to work in construction. But getting them on their purpose, and then once they're in that program of study, helping them make progress in good fashion. About 1 out of 4 students in California can't get a course they need to be able to complete. So it's about being able to schedule courses in the right way. It's about being able to leverage technology so that they can get information to kind of guide their journey. It's about being able to do things like degree audits, where you can say, let's do some what-if analysis, and if I take this sequence of courses this semester, well, how will that impact when I graduate? And I can always see the finish line. What you really want as a student always to be able to see the finish line. Because if they can see that finish line, they know what it looks like and they know what they have to do to get there, they can start taking what are often very complicated lives and putting them in line in a way where they can complete. We often forget, and a lot of low-income students, folks in community colleges don't forget because they deal with it every day, but many of these students do not have simple lives. And for them, the ability to see that finish line is tough because they're dealing with kids, they're dealing with parents, jobs, all the different things that are happening in their lives. And for them to be able to see that end state really matters. And one of the other things that is pretty, for us, inspiring about some of the work you're doing in this state is it's not just seeing the end state, it's also seeing some small wins along the way. So the idea of doing credential mapping, where you say, let's have a certification that leads into a diploma, that leads into an AA. Because when a low-income student has to stop out because the kids get sick or the plant closes, it's really nice for them to have a credential that gives them a chance to have a living wage while they're fixing their life when they start to come back. And that's one of those kind of due diligence things where in the progress stage you put those pieces and parts together and it gets pretty powerful.
And Dr. Ralls, I think in North Carolina, you would be the best person to speak about the work that we're doing with stackable credentials.
Well, I think we have a real opportunity here. We're taking over 80 different program areas and primarily our technical areas of the colleges and rethinking those in terms of using models from the National Association of Manufacturers, but building on a core academic framework, core technical skills, but using the flexibility of certifications, which have a great deal of meaning to employers, and creating the flexibility we need to provide the to meet the business needs, but also provide more of a core credential that students can take out into the workplace. And so I think that effort, I think some of the work we're doing with the gatekeeper courses are important in terms of progress, how that links up, being able to really accelerate in that first year, get a lot of momentum moving, but make sure students stay focused on those gatekeeper courses, which can also often be the barriers if they wait too long. So the work that's taking place in that regard. And then, you know, as we look at North Carolina, I think, as a technology leader, we're recognized as a distance education technology leader. We're rethinking some of that too, looking at the fact that while we offer a breadth of courses, very significant number of our students take just a core group of courses, and how do we build up the richness of those particular courses? And so I think that's key to progress within our system, because that provides the convenience that many of our students need, but they need to have the rigor that comes with those courses as well.
You can literally map to what I would call the 7 to 10 golden courses, right? Where that just have to be offered for students to be able to progress. If you're in allied health, you've got to have anatomy physiology, right? If you're you just know the courses that are in that golden group. And a couple of things. One is having your faculty and librarians and others begin to innovate against the best. I mean, it's amazing the kind of courseware resources that are out there now. Really trying to find the best resources that are out there in those courses, and then the best kind of instructional innovations that are happening, and having them share that in a community of practice really, really matters. But the other is what you were talking about, is how you're offering them. So the ability to use your NC Learn initiatives and your kind of combined resources to say, no matter what, these 10, these 15 courses will always be available. They're going to be available online in a blended format on ground, but we're going to make a commitment that no student's going to be held back because these courses are not being there. And that's where the analysis of the lost momentum tells you that you've got to focus on this to be able to get it right, to be able to help the most students get across that finish line if they're going to do it.
Okay, finish line, completion. I think that's our link to employers, that's our link to transfer. Talk about that component of the framework.
Yeah, this is really important because I think a lot of people do great work to get to that finish line. And what's fascinating about community colleges is many students, when they get close to that finish line, a couple things happen to them. One, if they're transfer students, they think to themselves, well, my goal is to get a bachelor's degree, so I'm not really going to do the work of that last couple courses. I'm just going to go ahead and transfer now. In fact, many transfer students leave after 40 hours, 50 hours. They don't never finish the 60. And it's a shame. It's a shame for a lot of reasons. One, because very often life happens again and they don't have a credential with value. And getting to a 4-year degree sometimes takes 6 to 8 years, especially for low-income young adults. So it's a dangerous proposition. The folks at Valencia Community College have taken the step now of, if someone's going to transfer, of course they can transfer all their credits, but what they've done is it's an intervention moment where they say, you can transfer now without your credential. You're about 75% likely to finish your bachelor's degree, which is a pretty high percentage. But if you graduate with your associate's degree, you're about 95% likely to graduate. And it just changes the conversation for you to kind of make the case about that value proposition. But that's an important set of conversations, because transfer is powerful, but transfer with a credential is the goal. You really want that student to transfer with a guaranteed credential as they walk in and go into that other program. That's why the guaranteed transfer pathways really work with your university partners working with you to say, if you graduate finish your associate's degree, you will walk in as a junior, guaranteed, and here is the value proposition for you on the other side. So that's part of that hard work of doing not just work with high schools, but now doing work with universities to get that. The second thing, it happens just as often in careers. What happens is somebody gets really close to the end and they get a job offer, right? Sometimes it's the beginning. If you're a welding student, you get 2 classes in welding and bam, they want to hire you. The challenge is getting them close to that finish line and really making the case to that student, you got a job offer? That's great. Let's help you finish even after you take that job. Because what you don't want to do is to go take that job and then in 2 years when that plant closes, you have to go back and retake a whole bunch of things you already know. Finish. And the whole idea of finish what you start. Let us help you finish what you start and make that a real value within the system. But it's more of a problem than you think. It's fascinating to see how many students are right there and they just don't cross that finish line.
And there's an element in the framework that crosses over all of the components, and that is student data systems. So that seems to be very important. So Dr. Milliron, if you'll talk about that in terms of the framework, and then Dr. Ralls, I'd like for you to talk about what we're doing in North Carolina to address student data systems.
So I think there are a few big things that run across the bottom, and you'll notice in the graphic we talk about student engagement. You want to keep students connected the entire way. Data are one of those things where to be able to do the work of lost momentum analysis, you need data. You need to be able to know where are you hemorrhaging students and what are the momentum strategies that are working and at what scale. And then you've got to be able to lean into this in a way where you actually put the pieces and parts together in a plan, and you can start looking at the data to see what's working. Because you're never going to get it right the first time. You need the data to be able to show you what's working and what are the early indicators. And for us, the early indicators are things like how many students are actually going from admissions to enrollment, how many are getting through Dev Ed sequence, how many are getting through the first 12 hours, 30 hours, and all the way across the 60-hour threshold. But all that means you have good data that tells you what's working and what's not. And then you need the leadership at all levels to be willing to look at those data and be able to say, okay, this is working or this isn't working. Strangely enough, leadership and data are deeply intertwined, because you can have all the leadership in the world, but without the data, it becomes who has the best argument, right? Who has the best anecdote or the best argument, and suddenly people are running in all different directions. You can have the best data in the world, but without the right leadership to do something with it, what happens is people just get paralyzed. You really end up almost in analysis paralysis, where people just don't know where to go and what to do. So that leadership, when I say leadership, I'm talking about student leadership, faculty and staff leadership, administrative leadership, at the governing board level, being willing to look at the data together and say, okay, so what do we do now? You know, and what are the biggest things, what are the biggest loss points, and what are the strategies that we want to lean into in our plan that'll actually lead to completion by design, right?
And in North Carolina, we're doing some significant work to help with that analysis.
Absolutely, and there's some very big things happening in terms of our P20 work that we do with public schools and universities, the efforts around our performance measures, where we're rethinking our performance measures, looking at it from our Success NC, Student Success Framework. But you know, one of the things I'm very excited about in all of that is, oftentimes I felt that we're swimming in data, but we're starving for analysis. And so you can have all the data, but without the analysis, it's like I've said in some cases, it's like having all the books of the Library of Congress, but they're all lying on the floor in front of you. How are you going to use that? And something I'm excited about is that one of the top software analytic companies, and probably the top in the world, SAS, is in our own neighborhood in North Carolina and has really jumped in and supported us in this regard, and is really helping us, contributing to our efforts. And I think that the combination of how we look at data from a student success perspective and focus, how we use that data, but then how we have the tools for analysis, if we can pull that together, that will help to drive us forward, not just in terms of what we're doing right now, but where the next places we go, and how do we keep this moving after we're all gone. Folks having those tools to make the next steps as we go through the process. And
it's even about driving the data all the way down to the student level, because we definitely want data for the state board. State board's got to have, they have to have some scorecards, they have to understand where we're going. You want it at the governing board level, you want it with your department chairs, you want your faculty and staff to be able to look at the data. But even getting data to students, and I actually think the real power of those data are going to unpack, and SAS knows this from their work in the consumer work, where the reason Amazon is so powerful is because not only does it sell you the book you're about to buy, but it says here are 5 other books you might want to buy, because it's all a predictive model, right? And students are used to that. So saying students like you who have had a challenge in this math course have found these learning resources to be helpful, pretty powerful. But even simple work, like the folks at Purdue have figured out, where you actually can take the data from a learning management system and say, students who behaved like you're behaving online succeeded, green light. Students who didn't had some challenges. Students who did what you're doing have had some challenges, yellow light. Students who've done the kind of things you're doing right now, red light. Stop right now, talk to somebody. And just giving them that little traffic light for the predictive model, it changed their course success rates by 50%. Because just telling the student, you might want to think about what you're doing right now, and giving the data to them, right, so they can make some.
Because it's often the student choices that determine success or failure, but they're not having the data to make those informed choices, or even knowing what those choices are. Right.
So great tools to have.
Yeah, and it's really important, because if we're going to do the hard work of deeply analyzing loss points, momentum strategies, and putting big plans in place, there's a partner in this, and the partner in this is a student. A striving student wanting to get better. And what we want is that student to become hardier, better, stronger, so that when they move on to a learning journey beyond our caring arms, they can be successful. But we have to have expectations for them as well, that they're going to look at the data and make some good choices about where they're going to go. It's got to be a yin and yang, right? That both of those things have to come together.
Dr. Ralls, what does completion by design mean for the North Carolina Community College system?
Well, I think two things. Well, excuse me, one of which the framework is providing us a framework for how we've approached success in C. I mean, we've gone into the notion of student success. We have a number of key initiatives, but what we don't want those initiatives to be is just stack one on top of the other. They have to work together in a framework, and so that's where the Momentum Loss framework to us provides a conceptual place where all that hangs together. Yeah. And so I think that's a key aspect for us. The other thing is that as we've gone around the state on our listening tour, we see that every college is invested in student success, and they're all working on very different areas, unique areas. A lot of times the bandwidth of the college means they can focus on this part and that part. The key is how do you bring all those things together? And from a state system perspective, you can't just go out and take something and say, okay, well, we're going to do something system-wide. But there are things you want to try to test out and see, do they work across colleges? Do they work in different scenarios? I think that the cadre of colleges provide a prototype, if you will, for trying things, for taking some risks, for us allowing them to go out and do some things that, you know, as a group of 5 colleges, and how does this all come together? And if you can do it among a group of 5, then maybe you can take a next step to a group of 58. And I think that's the thing that excites me about completion by design, a prototype for innovation around student success that pulls together not just the individual initiatives, but how it all comes together in terms of a framework of student success.
And love the fact in your cadre that you've included large urban institutions, rural institutions, suburban institutions. I think that's where we have to be careful, because the one-size-fits-all thing is dangerous. What we know is that each college has their own community, has their own way. But the one thing that's difficult about these conversations is people are just overwhelmed by the number of kind of innovative programs they're being asked to adopt. And one of the toughest things about this discipline with completion by design is it not only forces you to figure out what's working and where the big loss points is, it actually forces some conversations about what do you need to stop, right? You know, well, you're wiping yourselves out. The only way this works is to figure out a way to make your institution more productive by doing the best things that are going to make the biggest impact for most students. And the challenge is the work of AAC and U has made it pretty clear. A lot of our adoptions of innovation have been at these pilot levels that aren't making the impact we really want them to make. What we have to figure out is what are the fewest best things we can do that have the best impact for the most of the students that we're going to pull together, and really lean into those in a big way. Those are tougher conversations, figuring out, because people are wiped out right now. I mean, the budget cuts just nationally have made it tougher and tougher for us to do our jobs. Figuring out the highest best value things is an important set of conversations, which is why the leadership part matters.
And I think student success practices are going to differ institution by institution. Absolutely. What I think that we'll see is that principles and priorities will be consistent. That's what we'll learn from each other, and that's where I think you'll see consistency across very large institutions and very small institutions. And that's where the framework itself, I believe, provides the scaffolding for that to hang together. And then the practices will depend more on the institutions and the people in those institutions, the flavor of that place.
I think that's right.
Good. Well, as our conversation draws to a close, I want to let our audience know that we will be posting the Momentum Loss framework on our Success NC website, so everybody can look at it and study it. One of the deans at one of the community colleges who saw it recently told me this is the best 2 minutes he ever spent was sitting down with that Momentum Loss framework and really studying it deeply. He said it only takes a couple of minutes, and it's just an eye-opening experience for him and made him think differently about how he approaches student success at his college. I want to thank both of you for being here this morning to be part of this exciting conversation. I also want to thank the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and Dr. Milliron, you for your support of the North Carolina Community College system. We have an exciting opportunity ahead of us, and under the leadership of Dr. Ralls and our 58 college presidents and our cadre colleges leading this initiative, I think we will be successful. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.